I realized that the way to explain how different the Bronze Age was, how different civilization was at its takeoff, was to say what didn't happen. Because if you just begin by saying what did happen, everybody will say, no, it couldn't have happened that way. That's not how we do things. That's not what Milton Friedman and Margaret Thatcher would have done if they could have got into a time machine and gone back to Hammurabi and said, no, that's not what to do. Don't interfere with the market. They can't pay the debts, let them pay the price, let them go into bondage. If that would have happened, civilization never would have taken off. So I realized that everything had been taught in college about the very university study, PhD, for the courses about here's what money is, here's how money began, was all propaganda that was made up in the late 19th century when by opponents of government, by essentially the predecessors of Milton Friedman, the Austrian school, and which they were represented the landlord class, the monopoly class, and the financial class. And they said, the government, something terrible is happening. In America, they're passing antitrust legislation, what Teddy Roosevelt's doing. In Germany, they're nationalizing, what should be private enterprise. They're preventing us from making money by charging whatever the market will bear. The best kind of an economy is one with no government at all. Well, how could they define it? They have to say, civilization began without a government. And to people, I think Ronald Reagan, when he said the worst words in the English language is, the government's here to help you. What he meant was, from the very beginning of civilization, in this libertarian view, you had private entrepreneurs trying to make money, trying to create wealth, and the government interfered them by not letting them charge enough rent, by not letting them collect on their debts, by reducing the population to bondage, by keeping basic infrastructure and basic human needs in the public domain instead of letting them be monopolized for economic rent. And so the theory of money that I was taught in universities, and that every economist is brainwashed into thinking, except for the modern monetary theorists at the University of Missouri at Kansas City back then, said, well, money began in barter. And everybody would you'd have people growing wheat, corn, they'd maybe be weaving clothes and wool, or they'd be giving you wool. They'd be making handicrafts, shoes, and some people would provide raw materials like silver was something they liked, and they liked silver because it was lasted a long time. It was uniform, and that was what they wanted in barter. And so, because the people who were able to save money wanted something like silver or gold, that's why silver and gold was money. Well, the reason the banks wanted silver and gold was that's something that the financial sector owned. And the last thing that these free enterprise monetary people wanted was the idea that governments could create money. Well, and I began to look at how did money come into being. Well, it's obvious that it couldn't have happened the way that the economists are taught. One thing they say, silver is in uniform quality. Well, it wasn't uniform quality. If you're giving silver, how do you know it's pure silver? I think it was like 7/8 pure in Babylonian and various purities that were standardized in Rome and in Greece. So it wasn't uniform. There was counterfeiting way back then. So one thing, it's not as uniform as you thought. It didn't rust. That's true, that it lasted. And but then how do you express this money in prices? You can't go with a piece of silver and say, I'll pay you a piece of silver for a bushel of grain to go home and make bread with. How do you get an equivalency? Well, you'd have to have some either a measure of weight for the silver, or you'd have to have a volume measure of a cup. Well, if you have a scale in antiquity, how are you going to measure out a teeny little piece of silver for that bushel of grain? There were not scales of that quality in antiquity. It's just silly.
Yeah.
That kind of thing never could have happened. And what were the denominations of that people used? A mina was divided into 60 shekels. 60 shekels had a weight. That was silver weight was made equivalent to grain volume, and most of the debts of the population, being an agrarian economy, paid in grain. Well, the economists said, we don't understand that. How can you carry around grain in your pocket? You go to the alehouse, you pay for your beer in grain. Doesn't it get sort of seedy in your pocket after a while? Well, there was never any attempt to understand how transactions occurred in the Bronze Age. And it was not only the Bronze Age, it was down to medieval England, much of medieval Europe. Most debts were paid once a year when the crop was in. They weren't paid during the year. You would run up a debt during the year. As I said, you'd run up a debt to, here we are at Austin's Ale House, to be settled at harvest time on the threshing floor. We have all of the contracts. They all said this money will be paid on the threshing floor. We'll weigh it out. The money that's paid to the ale house will go to them. The money that's paid to the palace for advances of what you need to live and to cultivate your land will go to the palace. What you owe to the temples for what they provide will go to that. What you owe to creditors, if you got sick and you needed money, they'll go to them. All the debts are going to be paid then. And that seemed to be that, you say that and you think, oh, now I understand how it works. But there's that nobody had to lend money for any of this. Everybody was just doing business. They'd give you the drinks. They'd give you all the services you needed. It was a credit economy. There's one thing that is not taught in American economic universities: credit and debt. It didn't play any role at all in this idea of money.